Shall I make a start? Are we good, Richard? Okay. Thanks. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Children's Culture and Community Scrutiny Committee. Likely to be the last one, perhaps in this current incarnation. I'm Councillor Tony Clark. I am chairing tonight in the absence of our regular chair, Councillor Nichols. So to move on to the first agenda items, so apologies for absence. So I have two apologies for absence. Councillor Nichols, of course, I just want to read something that he sent through in a second, and also Councillor Taylor, who is now substituted kindly and very last minute by Councillor Whitcroft. Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Okay, we are waiting for a couple more councillors, so they may turn up shortly. So just in terms of Councillor Nichols' apologies, he is otherwise engaged today, unfortunately, but he has sent a little bit to pass on, really. So he says, I am disappointed to be missing the last meeting of our committee. Can I thank all the councillors and council staff for their support over the last 2 years, especially Emily and Tony as vice and Reece as lead support. As a new councillor, being on the committee was new experience, never mind the challenge of chairing one. All members have impressed with their diligence in reading reports and quality of the questioning of those presenting them. I have learned so much from all those involved with CCC, Children's Culture and Communities, so that was a big thank you from him. Okay, so that's agenda item 1. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest in this particular topic? No? Okay. So I'll move to agenda item 3 and the minutes. We have got Councillor Corshaw.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've circulated in advance just a slightly amended bit of wording, page 7, minute 56, the second paragraph. So it's the bottom paragraph on the page. It's just to tighten up there was various interests that were declared, particularly myself, and it's just to make it clear which interests related to which item. I'm not going to read the wording, but I think everybody here has seen my proposed alternative wording. So if everyone's happy to accept that, I'll propose that we just amend the minutes to that, but otherwise it all looked fine to me.
Thanks, Councillor Corshaw. Are we agreement on that? Looks like it. Yep, agreed. Okay. So with that amendment, then that are the minutes agreed. On to agenda item 4, public participation. We don't have any speakers tonight. So we then move on to agenda item 5, which is the Clear Hold Build report. And we have Council Officers Laura Williams, Joe McKelly, apologies if I mispronounced that, and Sergeant Stuart Henderson to give their report, or at least present it and answer questions.
Okay to kick off, Chair?
Oops, sorry.
So am I okay to kick off?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, in your own time. Sorry, apologies.
It's all right, thanks. So I'm going to give a very brief update, as I'm sure you've all read the report and the presentation, and then I'll hand over to Sergeant Stu Henderson from North Yorkshire Police and Joe, who is the council's strategic lead for Clear Hold Build, to answer the more detailed questions because they're much closer to this than I am. So just for background, we were approached by the police about 18 months ago to discuss the concept of Clear Hold Build, which is a place-based effort to unite the police, the local authority, other partner agencies and the community in an effort to drive out serious organised crime in an area and then to build community resilience to stop it taking hold again. There's been really significant success with the scheme in other areas in the region, notably Barnsley has been really successful. So then over that period of time, we've worked with North Yorkshire Police to convene a silver steering group to kind of set the strategic direction for the work. And then that group oversees a bronze operational group, who are the people who are out working on the ground. We had a really successful formal launch event for partners a year ago, March 2024, and work's then been underway on this scheme in Clifton. And the report gives you a bit of an update, a flavour of that activity. Final thing I'd like to highlight is the fact that almost everything that's been achieved by the partnership has been done with no additional resource, no additional funding. And I think it's a really good example of the kind of joined up working across organisations, and with the local community absolutely fully involved, that we want to start embedding across the city with the neighbourhood model that we've talked about previously here. So yeah, I'll hand over to Joe and Stu to take any questions.
Sorry, thank you, Laura. Did you want to say anything, Sergeant Henderson, or?
I can say something just in relation to just the police response, if everybody wants to hear that. So I'm Sergeant Stuart Henderson. I am the Naval Policing Sergeant for York North, and within that area covers Clifton. So Clifton was chosen as an area for clear hole build to take place. There's two sites that were identified within North Yorkshire, Clifton and Barracliff in Scarborough. And that's predominantly been done through quite a lot of in-depth analysis around the presence of serious and organised crime groups, vulnerable people who have been identified as being cuckoo through county lines, and areas of deprivation. And following that, we put a team together with two neighbourhood policing officers, the PCSOs at the time, and set to really sort of the clear aspect, and that was developing intelligence, working with the community to develop that community intelligence, and to start to work with the community to get rid of some of these organised crime groups and these people who were exploiting vulnerable people. As a result of that, there's been a number of Misuse of Drugs Act warrants that have been taking place. It's been incredibly difficult in terms of the community intelligence that comes in. Clifton was quite a difficult area to grasp, quite a low sort of level of trust with the police. We are seeing, and certainly we've seen over the last 18 months, a big increase in information that's coming in, which is good as we move on to the hold and the build phase, because it's an early indicator that people are less tolerant of people that are causing them misery within their area of where they live. So we've executed a number of drugs warrants. We have worked closely with a number of other departments within North Yorkshire Police, namely our Serious and Organised Crime Unit, our Operations Sentry team, which is a new team, which they are predominantly tasked with disrupting serious and organised crime. And then obviously we've worked alongside our partners within CYC, the fire service, the schools, and as Laura's mentioned, have developed those bronze groups. As part of the bronze groups, we identified early on a number of strands that we thought were pertinent to the delivery of the Clear Hole Build project, which have been the youth and young people, crime and ASB, violence against women and girls, and each one of those groups has a relevant working, has a lead and a working group associated to it. And as you'll see probably from the year on presentation within the appendix, there's been a lot of real good work that's taken place within those groups. I can only really comment for the crime and the antisocial behaviour, but certainly sort of just some of the headlines in that is that we've not only have we executed lots of misuse of drugs warrants, we've secured premises closure orders and a subsequent eviction of a nuisance tenant that was causing quite a lot of misery down a street in Clifton, and we executed 2 drugs warrants at that address, and yeah, her subsequent she was evicted. We've worked alongside our trading standards partners, and we're along with a number of premises, 2 premises within Clifton, seized quite a large quantity of unregulated vapes and tobacco, which I think we'll probably all agree is quite an emerging trend, and is almost a bit of a shop front for serious and organised crime. And when we delve deeper beneath that, it actually uncovers quite a few other things that we're concerned about. So that's sort of just really some headlines that we've been involved with, along with, you know, a number of arrests, without delving down to the figures. I couldn't give you the exact, but searches, stop search to people on the street, and a reduction in crime, an overall reduction in crime in Clifton, which is what we want to achieve, and a reduction in the amount of vulnerable people that are being cuckooed. Clifton had the highest number of people that were being cuckooed by county lines when we first started, and we've seen that figure massively reduced. Now, we know that as we move on to the hold and build phase, that we can't take our foot off the gas, and we know that it's not simply that once we've done the clear phase, we will switch off. As we move on to the hold and build phase, there is going to be so many clears that we maybe need to do as things pop up, that we need to address, and we're braced for that. But overall, it has been a real success, and certainly speaking of a number of our partners, and members of the community, there has been that level of success that's been seen. As I said, it was predominantly quite a difficult area to tackle. You know, you can go to some areas in the city and the police they'll happily tell the police what's happening with their neighbour. Whereas in Clifton, we sort of really struggled with that. So, yeah, our work's not done. We've got a number of campaigns that are ongoing. Again, to try and keep hold of that intelligence and get that intelligence coming in, because without that information, we can't do our job. So, we really welcome that. But ultimately, from a police perspective, that's it.
Thank you. Joe, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just briefly building on what Stuart has said. And I think one of the issues with clear hold build is that the three themes can be flexible. And I think where we find ourselves at the moment is sort of moving towards the build phase, but that reflects that there has been a significant amount of partnership working around building the capacity of the community and engagement over the last year. And we had this recent event in March where we sort of reflected over the last year and all this sort of work, the amazing work that had been done across the bronze and silver groups with the community, and that's reflected in the strategic build plan that has the respective themes outlined in there and the progress that we're making against the objectives. In addition to that plan, we've delivered two really well-received community newsletters entitled Connecting Clifton, and they've been delivered by the partners themselves alongside local volunteers and residents, and they've been, as I say, really well received. I think one of the most pleasing things we've seen in response to the newsletter is people just saying, I didn't know this was going on in Clifton. Wow, all of this amazing work is taking place. And then people are then connecting with the community hub at Marjorie Waite Court, reflecting a lot of loneliness and isolation. So that's been really pleasing to see, and to see that sort of public face of the partnership out there pounding the streets. I think Stuart and I both did Roundtree Avenue amongst a number of other streets when we delivered the first newsletter. So yeah, it's a very impressive project, I would say, but the power of collaboration through the partnership.
Thank you. And I've got already a question from Councillor Crawshaw, Councillor Whitcroft, Chris. Yeah. And start with you, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for this. And I just, will say it's fantastic to see work like this happening. I know from work that was done in Micklegate Ward quite a few years ago how important having that kind of collaborative approach is when you've got a particular set of problems and tackling that. So that's really positive. I've got a couple of questions really. One is just sort of thinking about, I think Laura, you said that this had all been done really without any additional resources, although I assume that there has been quite a lot of maybe allocating of resources into tackling it, but it just makes me think if there's other things that have been picked up from this project that could be applied on a broader scale, whether it's targeted to different areas of the city or even possibly on a sort of citywide basis, and then sort of not directly related to that but kind of linked to it, I suppose. one of the issues that we were very concerned about when we were dealing with a county lines issue within Micklegate ward was that whilst we could tackle the specifics of that in this location, we were conscious that we were potentially only just shifting it across to a different part of the city or to, you know, somewhere else, or that it could, you know, disappear for 6 months and come back again. So it's just understanding both for Clifton how you sort of guard against, and I think that's probably the build element of this, but also all those positives that you're seeing in Clifton, I'm hoping that they're not sort of creating any negatives anywhere else in the city in terms of just pushing a problem elsewhere, and if they are, how do we address that?
I think ultimately what we were clear of when we first started was that this cannot be solely done by the police. And what we didn't want people to see is this, oh, this is just another police project. We're going to be here for 6 months and then they'll disappear again. I think if it is solely a one-sided approach, you do run the risk of that displacement and moving that displacement and then allowing that displacement then to fester in another area. However, with this project and certainly the importance of working together means that, yes, if, for example, we rid county lines in Micklegate and all of a sudden they find themselves in Warmgate or Fishergate, we can then work with our council partners to say, well, they're at this address in Fishergate. Let's do what we've just done in Micklegate and we'll get them out. So that's it's the real importance of ensuring that we're working together. Whereas, you know, there's only so much that the police can do. You know, we can't arrest our way out of problems, which is often something that's often quoted. So it's about really to stop that or to minimise the impact of that displacement is that everybody works together, and that is the sole aim of this project. Is that it is essentially a problem-solving approach to dealing with serious and organised crime. And a big part of that problem solving is working together. It is a project that, you know, there's without doubt, there's lots of learning that's come from it. And, you know, it's great testimony to everybody that's worked on it that we could quite easily pick this project up and move it to another area. I know the Chief Constable wants more clear hole build sites across the force. Whether any of those would be in York, I don't know. It's highly likely, but certainly I think, you know, there's a lot of learning that's come from it, and I think certainly to minimise the impact of that displacement, the key is ensuring that everybody is working together, and it can't be a one-sided approach.
Yeah, I think, and in terms of, I guess, moving it away from specifically the clear hole build and the police side of things and the serious organised crime, there is a lot of learning, and a lot of what we've uncovered is probably what we already knew, which is about, it's all about the kind of relationships and people working together, and all we've really done there is formalise a lot of good work that's already happening and link people up. And by putting that Silver Strategic Group together, it's linked people together who were already having those conversations, like very naturally having those conversations, working together, or who already had relationships. And then sometimes just bringing people into a room, they discover those kind of points of connection within their work or ways that they can support each other. You know, York Learning have come into the room and said, oh, actually, we could offer X, Y, and Z things. And, you know, wouldn't that be great in terms of tackling this problem? And you can kind of see the sparks fly in a room of people kind of helping each other out. We could offer this, we could put this on here. And I think, you know, that is what we want to achieve moving forward with this neighbourhood model. It is on obviously a more hyper local basis, the fact it's only been in Clifton, but essentially that's what we want to do. And I think people fixate a lot when we talk about neighbourhood or community working on people all being co-located in one building, but I think this has proved the point that it's much more fundamental than that. It's about getting people talking, it's about building those relationships, and that people can be sat in the same building or the same room when it's appropriate and when it works, but actually it's about picking up the phone to each other. It's about, you know, setting up a meeting and getting people talking. So it's definitely something that we want to take away some of this learning from and roll that out more widely.
Thanks. Councillor Avila, is it on this point that you wanted to come in? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. And the points that have been made about the wider benefits of building resilient and cohesive communities is one of the benefits that we've seen. But you make the point incredibly well, Councillor, that I think it was either the last meeting or the meeting before when we had Jay Mowat come to talk about the with the Safer York Partnership report. You know, displacement is an issue. Yes, a highly visible police presence in Clifton doesn't mean that there's no policing going on elsewhere, but it does mean that Clifton becomes an unsafe environment for those people that are wanting to set up a centre of operation there. Is there somewhere slightly less visible? And one of the learning points that I've certainly picked up on, and you as ward councillors will also be picking up on at your surgeries and via emails, is getting a report from residents saying there's drug dealing going on next door, or there's this going on. One, it's incredibly positive that that type of thing is happening, but it does bring with it a level of frustration, because just by saying there's this going on, you as ward councillors, me as exec member, the police, Safer York Partnership, can't then turn around and say, oh, great, we'll be round with the, we'll be round tomorrow to put the door through. There's a lot of intelligence gathering that needs to take place over a period of time for that warrant to then subsequently be executed. But during that period, there's a period of silence, if that makes sense. The intelligence itself is fantastic. We need it. We need more of it. It will be, you know, in some cases, it will be gold dust. It will be something that hasn't been highlighted before. Sometimes it will be information that will back up other sources of information. But it might be 3, 4, 5 weeks of relative silence, and that I've picked up on is saying, well, I've reported this, why hasn't anything happened? I've done this, why hasn't anything happened? And you're thinking to yourself, well, look, I would love to be able to say, you know, give it a week, give it a fortnight, but that, you know, that door will be going, will be getting put through. But you can't say that, because you can't then, you know, run the risk of tipping off the people that are working there. So these are some of the learnings that we have that we have to take from it, both as local councillors, as officers, and as the police. But we need to make sure that not only are we encouraging people to report, whether it be via Crime Stoppers, whether it be any you know, a direct conversation with a PCSO or a PC, or to us as their elected representatives, is these things weren't happening regularly in some areas of the city. And the more we can say, you know, yes, it's been taken seriously, and there is that visibility of, oh, there was you know, there was an arrest, and that person has moved on. But that's where the other bits of the hold and the build element is. You know, there's an element that housing have to then get involved in. There's an element of local area coordination. How do we then support those residents that have either been a direct victim or that have been impacted negatively by what's gone on in the area? And so these are all the important things. Sorry, that was a more lengthy answer, but I think it was one that I really did want to make clear, not just to yourselves, but, you know, for those that are watching this. It is incredibly important and it's never ignored.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Whitcroft.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report and for the great work that's been done. I echo Councillor Crawshaw's comments there. Just related to antisocial behaviour, that's probably something that we've all experienced and had residents talk to us about as local councillors. And the link between antisocial behaviour and then going on to sort of serious and organised crime is a very clear one. But often I think sometimes residents who contact me might think, is this a crime worth reporting? Is an incident of antisocial behaviour something that I should bother the police with or bother the council with? And of course, they should always report it, and I was trying to make that clear. But how have you worked with that understood that link, and how have you been able to build on dealing with antisocial behaviour through this work? And could you just explain a bit more about that link between antisocial behaviour and more serious crime?
Yeah, so as you say, you know, we would always encourage people to report anything that they don't feel thinks right. You know, that can be anything. Like say antisocial behaviour. It can be a suspicious vehicle. It can be you know, anything that really that they don't feel is right in their community. In terms of antisocial behaviour, we often sort of think of the large groups of youths on the street corner. We often think about, you know, the people that are out at night, places that look unsafe, feel intimidating. But obviously, when we talk about antisocial behaviour, we also talk about antisocial tenants. We talk about people who are generally causing a bit of misery, to people in the communities. And quite often, if we have a premise that we know where somebody is supplying drugs, that can often attract unsavoury individuals. And again, then could quite easily attract groups of youths. It can also then potentially attract other rival people who might want to take over that business. And before you know it, you know, pretty much there's the link between your antisocial behaviour and the serious and organised crime. I would always say, report it. You know, you could have the golden piece of the puzzle that we want to try and solve. You know, nobody's ever going to tell anybody off or come after anybody for reporting something so minor, because, you know, that could be the key that we need to, like say, Councillor Pavlovic's mentioned about getting us through that door to secure that warrant. So that would always be my ask. But yeah, often, like as you quite rightly mentioned, is that crime and antisocial behaviour do often go hand in hand, and quite often without one, you haven't got the other. So that's why we were quite clear to also have within our crime strand antisocial behaviour, so that we addressed antisocial behaviour as well as the criminal element as well.
Is supplementary? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And a particular focus, and you did mention it there, Sergeant, around young people particularly, and that's the association people have with antisocial behaviour, rightly or wrongly. I think wrongly in a lot of cases. And it mentions in the report about how you've tried to promote the voice, influence, participation of young people in this as a part of the wider stakeholder strategy. Could you just talk a little bit more about the role that young people have played here and how you've engaged with them, what different groups you've used and the response that you've got? Because I think it's important to point out a lot of young people are often the victims of antisocial behaviour more than other groups, and it's important to make sure that we stand up for law-abiding young people in the city.
Absolutely. So when we first started the project, we decided to hold our first bronze group meeting at Vale of York School, and I reached out to Rob Orr, who's one of the teachers at Vale of York, and who was led on our young persons strand. And pretty much early on, we identified that is that, yes, we do have a number of people who are responsible for antisocial behaviour, but obviously within that group is a wider part of young people who often, like say, that their voice doesn't get heard. So we quickly set about and we conducted a survey with young people as to what made them feel safe in Clifton, what didn't make them feel safe in Clifton, what did they want in Clifton, and it pretty much was as we expected, in that there was a lot of people who whilst they were out playing, or they were out and about in Clifton, that they encountered people who they felt were intimidating, possibly under the influence of drugs. We also, alongside the youth survey, a number of our PCSOs were out doing door-to-door surveys. And very early on, we wanted to gauge that sort of feeling as to what was the community's issue. You know, we've got all this rich data of why we're going to Clifton, that all these things are happening in Clifton. But actually, fundamentally, this project is not about doing it to the people of Clifton. It's about what do the people in Clifton want from us. So we did a lot of door knocking, conducted hundreds of surveys, told people about the project face to face. This is your neighbourhood policing team. This is where we are. And from that, again, emerged a number of themes that we suspected. You know, drug supply, drug taking, and antisocial behaviour were the key things that were coming out of that from members, people in Clifton. But the youth survey from that was, again, you know, we were asked to look at our green spaces in Clifton. You know, what could be done in terms of the green space in Clifton? Could they be revamped? Could things be put in those green spaces which are more attractable to young people? We have worked alongside Inspire Youth, and the PFCC, or the old PFCC's office, have secured them funding to have the For Youth van which goes out. I know I've been down there on a Thursday night. I try and get my team down there whenever we're on a Thursday night. Initially, there was real slow take up, but we went a couple of weeks ago, and I would probably say it was in excess of 20 to 30 youths there, which was really, really good. Just all engaging with activities going off, and, you know, it just been a safe space for people to go. So that's what we've done in terms of that. And also there's lots of other background work that's gone on with young people, and just ensuring that they've got those positive role models in the community.
Thanks. Next up, Councillor Cork.
Yeah. Sounds great. Councillor Crawshaw was ahead of me with this question. I was going to ask something very, very similar in terms of the displacement, but was one aspect of that maybe we could cover a little bit more. Given that there have been no additional resources made available, to have the resources that have been necessary, you've mentioned the PCSOs doing door-to-door work and so on, inevitably means there are less resources elsewhere in the city. And anecdotally, I hear of increases of issues in other places. I wonder how far you're hearing that and how that is being monitored, whilst those areas are clearly not receiving the resources they would otherwise have received if there hadn't been this focus within the Clifton area.
So the resources that we put into Clifton were already there. So the two PCSOs that were covering Clifton were already involved in the project, and the two officers that were working on the project are working on the project are predominantly just for that area, and they're not necessarily within our numbers. So in terms of what in terms of other people missing out or getting a lesser degree of service, then that's not the case. You know, we're all still pretty much doing our other daily business. It just means that the PCSOs working in Clifton have the Clear Hole Build project to focus on, and the crimes that occur in Clifton, which probably fall out of the Clear Hole Build project, outside of the actual remit of the project, still get looked at by the PCSOs in Clifton.
So I think Councillor Pavlik, I should have introduced as the exec member for Safer Communities previously, but I think, did you want to add something? Yeah.
Not a problem. And just on that, Councillor Cullick, both myself and Councillor Knight today have just been at the police and fire panel, talking with the Deputy Mayor for policing, police, fire and crime. And both the Chief Constable, the relatively new Chief Constable, and the government have a priority on neighbourhood policing, and there will be a considerable increase in policing numbers, both PCSOs and warranted officers working in neighbourhoods. So I can't quite remember, Emily, and I don't know whether you can, the actual numbers. I think it was 30 and 13, either 30 warranted officers and 13. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, an additional 31 officers, of which a significant number will be based in the urban areas in York. So we can ask for more detail of increased police resources and send that separately to members of the committee if you think that would be useful.
I would certainly appreciate that. And as I say, I've certainly been aware of issues in some places where previously there hadn't been such a history of that. And there never seems to be an adequate response.
Thanks. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, it's about 30. That's the uplift that we'll probably be getting in York.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank everyone for the report. It's useful to have one which is so detailed and covers outcomes. I think residents are very keen on seeing what has resulted from a project like this, and it clearly showed the need for it in the Clifton area. I was very interested in the comments about no additional resource. It was drawing together additional the existing network, but in some parts of the city there are vacancies in those posts that this project relied upon, and that's really a concern of mine in Westfield, that we don't have those PCSOs. It was quite ironic that one of the PCSOs who has left and gone into another part of the system was quoted in the report, and you know, I don't decry that. There is always going to be a circulation, but in Spy Youth, one of their sessions was moved from Westfield to Clifton, and it does illustrate the need to get the youth services policy through for a whole of the city, because from what you've said, Sergeant Henderson, in terms of intelligence, it's important to have that baseline and that is relevant across the whole city, so that if you need to come into an area and crank up the volume in terms of the response, which is what you've done here, it's already embedded. And I think that does illustrate the importance of all of the people who work in the community and draw together those networks. You know, you mentioned schools, churches, you know, they're all there to provide support to people, but also that information that you need to get across that this is that you're working to make the area a better and safer place to live in. So I think what I'd like to get is the information on the gap in PCSO numbers and PCs, to be honest, across the city, so that where we have seen in the past hotspots, they blow up in areas. Some are familiar, some are, where's that come from? But it's important to have that infrastructure in place across the whole city. And I think it would be helpful to understand the lessons learned from this project that you would very much like to replicate on a varying degree of scale across the city, so that there is that benefit of experience that you've learned with all of the effort that's gone into this particular project. Thank you, Chair.
I think from just to sort of answer the tail end of that is that I would imagine that sort of towards the end of this, we'll have a report which sort of looks at the outcomes and the learning from it. Just in terms of vacancies and numbers, without looking at the full sort of numbers, there is going to be an uplift in neighbourhood policing. The Chief Constable has made it very clear, certainly to ourselves and to us, that he wants outstanding for neighbourhood policing, and that's understandable. You know that, and you're quite right. Is that neighbourhood policing officers should be in communities, and that's where the best of policing is done. You know, that it's fundamental, and as is often quoted, it is the bedrock of policing. I would certainly say it's in the job that I've done in the last 2 years here as the neighbourhood policing sergeant. It's been one of the most challenging, but it's also been one of the most rewarding, in that we see these successes. Yes, there are resourcing challenges, and I don't think any of us probably works in an organisation where you've come in one day and said, you know what, we've got enough people to do exactly what we need to do. And that's pretty much is policing. But yes, there is going to be a significant uplift in neighbourhood policing numbers across the force, not just in North Yorkshire. I think that's probably what Councillor Pavlovic is alluding to. So yeah, that resourcing, and you know, if we were to look at another project in another area, I'm pretty sure that based on what we've learnt and done in Clifton, could quite easily be replicated elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the report. And it's really nice to see this coming through, because I remember when we were kind of starting and it first came to committee. So it's really nice to see, as Councillor Waller said, some really strong outcomes, some really specific kind of, you know, actions. My question's kind of along a similar line though. I know that this project is still ongoing, but there is already so much learning from it. And I'm thinking about kind of legacy, and I'm thinking about risks as well. You know, that was the big thing when I was reading this. It's really lovely to see this work, but how many times do we see these amazing things and then they stop? And actually kind of, you know, as Councillor Waller already mentioned, we know that a lot of the learning around things like Inspire Youth and the impact they are incredible. We know how incredible they are because we had them first in Westfield. No, you had them first in Micklegate, but prior to Clifton, you know, they've kind of moved around the city. And I think there is a real thing in terms of that risk, in terms of moving, when you move these things that are greatly successful and make a massive impact in areas that really need them, when they kind of go, well, it's worked here, so let's move them over there. But now these, you know, we can't be everywhere at once. That seems to me to be kind of a massive risk. But the other thing that I was kind of thinking from this and from the discussion is almost like a challenge. How can we start to be building this structure already in the other areas of the city? You know, I think that we really feel, particularly as councillors in Westfield, this is working so well. This is how we need to be working in our area. This is how we need to be working in other areas. So I appreciate that once you've got another year down the line, there'll be another report. But actually, you know, if you've watched any of these committees, everyone always says, we see so many reports. What we want to see is kind of, how can we use this now? Like, what changes can we be making from the learning from this between now and you guys coming here next year in the other areas of the city as well? And maybe that is these new neighbourhood policing, you know, PCSOs and PCs. How can we make sure that as they come in and join our teams in other areas, the learning from this is embedded from the day that they start? And how can we, you know, what's the plan to build this into being how we work across the city? But it's really wonderful to see how successful it's been, and it is ongoing, and we just want it everywhere for everyone, which obviously is fine. Thank you.
Laura, do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I don't want to write reports anymore than you want to read them. Spent a significant amount of my life writing reports. So I'll be boring and say again, as I seem to say a lot at the moment, I think a lot of this learning and learning that we've taken from other successful things that are happening in the city at the moment, like the mental health hubs and the family hubs, has got to be a fundamental part of how we take forward this neighbourhood working model, and how you work with your communities officers and how they build those teams within areas, build those relationships, bringing in local area coordinators, bringing in the police are really keen to be involved with that neighbourhood model and their uplift of neighbourhood policing. They want to be tied in with that. You know, we've already got strong buy-in from health in terms of the neighbourhood model. So I think all of the learning from this, whilst this very specific pilot is happening in Clifton, and that is a very specific piece of work, it's the same officers, it's the same group of people within the local authority who are going to be taking forward these neighbourhood work streams, looking at, without preempting the next report that I'm writing, to come to you in July, I think, but looking at various work streams, one around kind of co-discovery and co-production with communities about what that model should look like, because that will be slightly different in each of the areas, around how we move our own staff internally, and shift things around to tie in with that 4-area model, and the kind of communications around that, how people can look at that brilliant Connecting Clifton newsletter and how we can do more of that in areas to engage people. And I think with Clifton certainly, but with all of this, the intention is never for this to be this happens in this area for 2 years and then it just dies. And I know that there will be people who've been here a lot longer than me who will have experienced that. You know, in Clifton itself, there have been really good initiatives in the past that have then kind of funding has run out, things have died off, you know, the take up hasn't been there. But the intention of Clearhold Build certainly is to build resilient communities and to help communities to become more connected, to help them to be able to kind of help each other more, you know, people helping people and building those relationships, so that when, you know, the police do withdraw slightly, or, you know, we're not as present in a particular area because we're working in X, Y, and Z areas, everything just doesn't kind of fizzle out and die. And that you know, the support is back in and back out. And like Stu referred to, that it won't just be that the clear phase ends and all of a sudden there's no police visibility, because there will always be things that pop back up again. It's a bit whack-a-mole, isn't it? I think, and that they'll need to go back in and do mini clears and things. But the intention is that we are helping people to become really resilient, and not need that level of intervention, I guess, is the dream of all of this.
Yeah, Joe, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I've just built on what Laura said there. I think one of the sort of key points of reflection for myself as chairing the silver group and working with colleagues in the bronze group is really the power of relationships, as Laura was mentioning. And that's one of the sort of design principles of the new neighbourhoods model around how we can scale up relational centred practice, because I think one of the terms I often use is when you put relationships first, everything seems to work a lot better. So it's about seeing relationships as an end in themselves, not just a means to an end. And that's when I think you move beyond sort of working together to genuinely a sort of culture of collaboration. And I think we've really seen that in Clearhold Build. So that's stuff that, you know, you should be able to roll out, because that's just a way of working that I think we would all embrace. It comes with its challenges, I suppose. You know, when Councillor Waller mentioned when you've got vacancies in the system, but that doesn't stop you from working in that way. And if there's a strategic desire to move towards that mindset and that way of practice that does reflect the power of relationships and community power in terms of how we build those stronger, more resilient and thriving communities, that's something that we all want, obviously.
Supplementary. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, it's really great to hear that from both of you. I think that commitment's really important. And I hope to see it, the kind of practice of it. I'd be really interested in your kind of perspective, Sergeant Henderson, because in Westfield specifically at the moment, we lost our sergeant, and then we've just lost our PC. Not lost, they're doing other things in other places. But what you're saying about kind of the relational working, like those relationships are really important. So actually, when you have those vacancies and then you're bringing new people in, I appreciate that the council is moving towards this way of working, How do you see that kind of, as we get a new PC, which hopefully we'll get a new PC, and as we fill those PCSO vacancies with new people, how do you see from the police's perspective embedding them in these structures and these systems?
I think probably I came to this project with no experience. I was doing the standard neighbourhood policing sergeant's job when one day an email popped in my inbox from the superintendent say, like we all get, see attached, and that pretty much that was it. We had to deliver we had to deliver clear hole build, and also we had to deliver our day-to-day business of neighbourhood policing. And it's one of the great assets of police is that we can turn our hand to many things. And I think whoever comes into those roles, and again, the chief constable has been very precise in that the people who are coming into those neighbourhood roles, he wants them to have the desire and passion to deliver outstanding neighbourhood policing, which it's only fair to the communities that we serve that they get those people who are dedicated. So I think anybody who comes into those roles will be able to turn their hand to this. In terms of the here and now, what could we do in readiness for that? One of the big things, or one of the big bits of learning that I've seen from Clifton is having an understanding those people, those loud voices within the community that rally people together and that bring people together, and having those groups and those organisations within wards that we can immediately reach out to and showcase what we've done, and they can come and help us, because as I said earlier on, this is not about the police doing it to the community. This is about the community coming to us and saying, look, these are the issues, we want you to help us. And if we've already got those groups, those organisations, those key individuals that we can go and speak to, who already know how the lay and feel of the community and what the baseline is, it makes our job really, really easy. So that's probably what I would say in that sense.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Sorry, Councillor Pavlovic, I know you wanted to speak before supplementary, so yeah.
No, it's I think a lot of what I wanted to say has been said by colleagues, but the important, and quite understandably, a lot of this meeting is focused on the clear element. We've got a police officer. We've talked about the outcomes. We've talked about the Misuse of Drugs Act warrants. For me, the most important element of clear hole build is the build element. It's about how does your community in Westfield, how does the Clifton community, how does the Micklegate community, and these are all micro communities. We work on a ward basis, but even within your ward, there will be 4, 5, 6 different communities, and it's important that we understand how that operates. That has its own dynamic, and it's about how we work together with those community champions, with those organisations, to say, you have power, you have influence here, and the police, as Laura has said, really want to work with us on developing this neighbourhood model. The voluntary groups will be important. The council officers will be important. Housing officers. It will cut across, schools. As communities, we build resilience. And we build cohesion, and these are the important things that, yeah, absolutely, where there are issues, where there is criminality, which we know is symptomatic in a lot of cases of other issues, but we've learned over the past few years, and certainly over the last 2 years, is that working together collaboratively across the council, in particular with the mental health hubs, with other sector partners, the new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy, with its multiple and complex needs, multidisciplinary team. These are how we will reach out to those people who are the most vulnerable and give them the best opportunity to reframe their lives.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks for the report. I think my comment is more of a comment than a question particularly. So I know when we had the meeting in January, I had a look at the government report of the national scheme, so the clear hole build that had happened nationally. And it was really interesting to go back to that reading this report, because all of the things that they talk about being really positive, sounds like you've been doing all of those things. So that's really great to hear. So it talks about the fact that if you don't get proper community buy-in and engagement, that those clear hole build areas don't work as well. And it talks about the fact that the limited budgeting is a bit of an issue, and the fact that they are suggesting that more money is put into it to be able to keep that sustained during the build process. But yeah, I just wanted to comment that all of the process evaluation findings of the conclusion that was done nationally seems like you're doing all the things that make it as positive as possible. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because that's really interesting and really good to hear that all that good community working that we have going on across the city has worked so well in this instance in particular. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. No need to comment particularly.
Further comments? No? Okay. That's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here and for the report. I echo many of my colleagues that it'd be good to see, how this could be applied across the city. I know in my particular ward, Guildhall, we have issues right in Wormgate that seem to be also have been apparent in Clifton. So it's good to see what can be done and what has been built on, and how we can make positive impacts within our communities. So thank you very much for your time and attending tonight's meeting. Yeah. Thing else, did you want to say? Yeah, actually, just because if we go on to the work plan, yeah, if Laura says, that'd be great. Thank you. Sorry, not this then. Sorry, good boy error there.
Sorry, apologies for being late. And I would have mentioned at the beginning that declaration of interest in the previous minutes should have included my declaration of an interest in the Theatre Royal as a supporter of it for the last 20 odd years. I did say it particularly, and I feel I ought to make sure it's recorded. Okay.
So I think we'd agree the minutes with an amended minute, but we can add that in as well. Yeah, great. Okay, so on to the work plan then. Yes, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, just for completeness, first of all, apologies for arriving late and a bit cart before the horse, but I don't know whether I needed to declare an interest in being on the panel for the police, fire and crime panel, so I just thought I should mention those. Thank you.
We'll make a note of that one then. Okay, thank you. Right, work plans. So see, this is likely to be the last meeting for as it currently stands, the children, culture and communities. So I guess what we need to look at are the things that we want to carry on in the work plan that we've already identified previously for the next for the structure that moves forward after annual council. So yes. Shall I come to Councillor Crawshaw, because I know you had a few things, Councillor Wall. So I'll come to Councillor Crawshaw first and then to yourself.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, my suggestion, I think, at the last meeting was just that we, rather than sort of seeking to set an agenda for a future committee that we don't yet know what the makeup is, if we were to sort of summarise what have perhaps been our areas of priority and what we think might be future areas or continuing areas of priority. Because obviously kind of everything that's in our remit, I would imagine, will become within the available remit of future committees, and it'll be for those committees to decide. My suggestion, with that said, would be that I think that the most important work that we have done, not just over the last couple of years, but historically on this committee, has been around SEND. We've done quite significant and important, and I think ongoingly important work around attendance and attainment gap. And I think sort of inherent within that is children and young people's well-being and mental health and things. So I don't know that it necessarily needs pulling out separately, but I think you can't really discuss one without the other. And then I think the other significant area that this committee has focused on over a long period of time and should continue to focus on is around sort of the combined aspects of corporate parenting, both in terms of children that are looked after, foster place sufficiency, the virtual school. So I think they would also be areas that I would hope that any future committee, even with a broader remit, would still keep as you know, holding high. The one thing that I think we have discussed in this committee, and I don't know that we would necessarily be able to make a clear recommendation from this committee or not, depending on how people felt. But the report that comes around Corporate Parenting Board, there's been a long and ongoing discussion that really ought to go to full council, and that it would be more appropriate, and it would give it the sort of status and the kind of focus. I did briefly before this meeting just discuss with Councillor Webb as the exec member if he thought that would be an appropriate thing to do, and he was very comfortable with that suggestion as well. So that would be my one other proposal, is that rather than continuing to see the corporate parenting report coming through scrutiny, it could also be looked at through scrutiny, of course, but it might be appropriate that it becomes something that comes regularly to council, which I think we have had it in the last year.
So I think, I think, but I'm in agreement, but I'll just throw it out in a second. So you're putting forward those as recommendations. These are the strands of work that we've been working on. It's really important that we continue those in scrutiny, I think.
So those strands that I mentioned, I think, are all things that I would suggest are things that any future committee should be the higher priorities in their work. But then, yes, separately, I suppose, I'm making the proposal that we actually also request that the Corporate Parenting Board report is something that is received by full council and given due attention there, rather than it being something that only comes through scrutiny.
And I would be very happy to second that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Quashaw. Councillor Cuthbertson, did you have a comment on that? And anybody else take some comments?
I don't want to take somebody else's place, except to say that I'm not sure that full council is the place to discuss the corporate parenting report. I think it certainly needs to come to this body first. Full council just doesn't, in my opinion, have the time to do it. I think that's a simple answer. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah.
I would, since you've expressed that opinion, I just feel like I would like to kind of politely, slightly push back on it. I think full council decides what its priorities are, and I think that's the point of requesting that it goes to full council, is that full council can, you know, for example, we've already kind of looked at things like motions on notice, and you know, there are so many aspects of full council. I think that finding a space for looked after children in this city to present this report in the public sphere of full council, whether it has the time or not, is a decision of the council. And I personally, you know, and of course, like, different people can think different things. I think that what we're saying is we think that is equally important as something that we recognise directly at full council. But
sorry, I'll just come to what Reece is saying here, is that it is an annual report that should be presented at full council. But just that that hasn't happened in the last kind of year or so. So yeah, Councillor Waller, did you want to add your comments to?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it has gone on to the council as a matter of course around this year. So I'm a bit perplexed when the executive member asked me how it went to the full council. There should be an automatic mechanism for that. Doing doesn't prevent there being an informed discussion as Street's made about. It doesn't stop there being an informed discussion at scrutiny about it, but ultimately it will go to full council.
Okay, so Is that just the discussion on councillor Crawshaw's point? And then
On the corporate parenting. Yeah,
are you continuing with further points, or were you coming on to the?
well, I can come on to the.
Well, I was going to make a proposal first before we moved on to that. If you are moving on to the next thing, which we shall do in a second, just to say that perhaps we should have that informed discussion at scrutiny, and that should be one of the recommendations. Obviously, it should be going to annual council as well. Is that agreeable, councillor? For sure.
My point was that I would hope that future scrutinies would consider that as being something that they would want to look at. I don't think historically it has routinely, regularly come to full council. Certainly in the 8 years that I've been on the council, I think I've seen it once. And that was a report to note. And so what I'm suggesting is that I think it should have a clearer place that shows quite clearly to the city that we as 47 councillors are corporate parents and that we value that input. I'm not saying that we should do that in exclusion of any other sphere of things, and I'm quite happy to sort of slightly reword my proposal to, discuss or consider how it can be, received by full council in an appropriate way but I think I just want to make the point of, we're going to be changing the focus of scrutiny in the round, and that's the right thing to do, I think. But I think there are just certain key elements of what scrutiny has historically done that it's really important that we capture the prominence and the value of those. And for me, taking the corporate parenting report with giving it some prominence through full council, demonstrating that we as 47 councils own it and are corporate parents, I just think is an important thing, because my worry is that otherwise it would end up a bit lost within everything else that goes on.
So I think what you're proposing, maybe what I'm proposing, is that we make the recommendation that goes forward to the next scrutiny structure, however it is, to discuss how we present as an important fundamental matter. No. So tell me again, Councillor Crawshaw.
So I've highlighted some things that I think will be things that future scrutinies might want to prioritise. That's one thing. That's separate. Completely separately from that, I'm proposing that the corporate parenting report, rather than it by default coming here, is by default to full council on an annual basis, as it perhaps should have been doing, but perhaps hasn't been doing, but has a clear place on the agenda of full council, just like the annual scrutiny report has, and other things. And that's it. We can also do lots of other things around it. I'm not suggesting it's at the exclusion of everything else, but just that simple proposal is what I'm suggesting that we do.
Okay.
And then it is not lost from any other agendas of anywhere else.
Okay.
Councils.
I see now.
Right.
Okay, can I just check, even though it's on the terms of reference for corporate parenting board, that the proposal is to encourage that it does go to full council?
I'm saying that it's, yes, so they encourage that it goes to full council. I'm saying that we, as a committee, that potentially will no longer be in a position to receive that report, say that actually it's really important that it goes to full council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other views on that? No. Are we happy with that proposal then? We seem to be. Okay, so we shall take that forward. Sorry, thanks for clarifying ultimately what was meant there, but that's great. Thank you. Right. So next, after we've got, I think we've got all the points from Councillor Crawshaw, which I think we're probably. Do we accept that those are the key things that we should take forward and recommend? So that's SEND, attendance and attainment, children's well-being, kind of folded up into that, and then also something else. Look after children
and foster place sufficiency.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got all that. Okay. Great. Right. We'll move on to Councillor Waller. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I was unhappy to see so many items not come to tonight's meeting, and colleagues feel the same. I think partly it's there may have been discussions between the chair and deputy chair, but as that doesn't include the Liberal Democrat group, we're cut out of those discussions. So the only input I had was an email from Councillor Nichols this morning. And really, I want to put on record that we do not want these items to go missing in the restructuring and scrutiny. The library consultation was done many months ago. And tonight we have all contributed to the discussion on the importance of neighbourhood policing. So those are two items that absolutely have to be retained on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Waller. I think they were flagged that the report may not come to this, but there was every intention of bringing it to it. Bringing those reports to this particular committee in this particular meeting of the committee. Pauline did actually add additional information about that, and the reason why the library needs assessment didn't come is because Explore needed more time to provide some information and to review the document. Both CYC and Explore need to be happy with it. They said they needed at least 3 more weeks with a key member of staff on leave, and this will come up hard against the deadline for the scrutiny report. So that was Pauline's email that came this afternoon, so that was hot off the press. So that was the reason why it didn't make it to this particular committee meeting. But certainly I absolutely agree that that should be a recommendation that does come to scrutiny in the new structure. And then was it the neighbourhood policing review as well that you mentioned, Councillor Waller? Yeah, again, I don't think there's any dispute with that. Definitely ones that I think it is a case of us tying up as loose ends, and there are a few things that we intended to bring to this committee that have not made it yet. But I do think we should make the recommendation that they do come to the committee, the appropriate one in the new structure. I think yes, Mike. Sorry, Councillor Pavlovic.
The neighbourhood policing review is a review that's been prepared by the Chief Constable. It's a formal paper, and it will be coming to the police and fire panel, and that is the right place for it to go before it comes to either North Yorkshire Council's scrutiny committees or City of York scrutiny committees. So it's not a discussion about the rights and wrongs of neighbourhood policing. It is a formal report with a set of proposals from the Chief Constable, and that's why it was provisionally put on, but hasn't been prepared and hasn't come to police panel yet.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. I think, yeah, Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. Just to add a couple of things. I mean, I know that the committees themselves might look a bit different, but I think in terms of the actual value of scrutiny, the new neighbourhood model as that comes through is something that a new committee, wherever it ends up, is going to want to focus on. And I think that might be one of the earlier things that kind of is prioritised in whichever committee it ends up in. But I think that, you know, as we've heard tonight, we've all got a stake in that kind of neighbourhood model and what that means for our communities. The other thing that I just wanted to kind of add, I suppose, is more of a reflection from being on this committee for 2 years. I think that we are very good at asking those questions, looking at the reports, really digging into them. But I think that sometimes there is a role perhaps within the new structure or within thinking about it, to think about the differences between the different people who come and present and how the committee behaves towards them. Not behaves is the wrong word, but for example, thinking about the last meeting, you know, when we have people coming in, like, for example, York Theatre Royal, they are not, you know, we sometimes, as part of particularly the culture remit, we have groups and organisations come in and present reports that they have written for us, even though they don't have to. They're not run by the council aren't decision makers. And I do think sometimes we have these, you know, these organisations who are putting their time aside for us as a council and councillors to kind of, you know, within the relational thing and because we're asking them to, but who we are not the people that they answer to. And I think that the committee sometimes questions and digs into those organisations in the same way as we dig into our council officers, our strategies, the things that we are responsible for as a council. And I just think it's important, if we're kind of looking at scrutiny, to look at how we differentiate between the things that we are scrutinising, because we have a real role to play in shaping those things for our residents, and the things that we ought to know about, and it's good for us to know about, but are being presented to us by external visitors and organisations, basically out of the good of their heart. And I just wonder if there's some reflection there about perhaps submitting questions in advance, or perhaps limiting the number of questions, just something to make it less of a chore for people who, at the end of the day, are taking out their own evenings and are not employed by York City Council.
There's two things there. The first one, which is about the neighbourhood model, which obviously I think tonight has shown how important that is for the city going forward. But I know, Laura, did you want to talk a bit about that? Because I know you wanted to change the dates for bringing that to scrutiny.
Yes, I mean, obviously, when I sent the email, I hadn't really thought about the fact that the committees are changing and dates are changing, but it was originally flagged for June. Because the paper was going to executive in July. That paper is now going to executive in September, because we want to spend the summer consulting and working with communities and residents and ward councillors on lots of things that will hopefully feed into that paper in September. So July would be a more appropriate date, and that then gives us the summer to incorporate your comments, thoughts, feedback into that report in hopefully a meaningful way.
Thanks. So if we take that forward as a recommendation for whatever the new structure is, to take that report in July. Okay, we've got that. And then the second one, sorry, Councillor Caution.
I was just going to say, I don't think you can be as specific as say July. I think recording that it's not available before July, because these new committees aren't going to meet monthly in the same way that they do currently. So.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, so essentially saying that we need it to come to scrutiny at the most convenient time.
But if you want to do it pre-decision, then before September.
Before September, yeah.
So
Councillor Pavlovic, were you going to add something to that?
I was just going to make that point. It will be coming to executive on the 2nd of September. So given that we don't have meetings in August, if it doesn't happen in July, there won't be pre-decision. And I certainly, for one, and I know Laura and everybody working on the neighbourhood model would really genuinely value cross-party input into this. The discussions that we've had when we've brought this to this committee have been incredibly invaluable from the opposition parties as well as the administration parties. So we want to take on board your thoughts, experience and knowledge. So I completely concede the point that Councillor Crawshaw's making, but there's a relatively small window.
Can we recommend then suggest July for that one? Because I think it seems the most appropriate one to bring forward. Well, the second point was about the reports. I think mainly for the organisations like the Museums Trust, Reach. I think in terms of the new scrutiny, obviously there will be less scrutiny meetings. And the idea is that there will be briefings for all members to attend, which will be recorded, which people will be able to access via a library. Are you perhaps suggesting that would be the best forum for those types of report?
I'm definitely suggesting that that's a conversation that we have with all of our external partner organisations. I think it shouldn't be a chore for external people to work with us. And I think that in the spirit of everything we've talked about tonight and neighbourhood models and relational models, actually, we should be going out to those organisations and saying, how would you like to work with us? This is a real opportunity to bring them in and to ask for their input and to listen to them. But I'd kind of missed the bit about or forgotten about the bit when I think about briefings. So perhaps we recommend that with our external partners who bring reports to us in a way out of the goodness of their heart, or because it's a statutory thing, but we don't have a kind of active stake in their running as a council, I would like to propose that we ask them how they want to, it might be that they find that the experiences of scrutiny have been really valuable. But I just think we should be asking our partners how they want us to work with them moving forward in a way that suits them the best.
Okay, so I guess that's another recommendation. Is everyone happy with that? I don't know quite how that will be taken up. Will it be taken up by the responsibility of the next scrutiny committee to discuss it with the partners, or
It
would?
goes as a recommendation to CCS,
Okay,
corporate.
to corporate. Okay, all right. Should we do that? We got any other opinions on that? Yes, Councillor Knight. Oh, no further points to that. We're just happy to make that as a recommendation. Okay, great. Councillor Knight, coming to you then.
So, 18 months on, I would still like the impact assessment relating to the library cuts in the light of the discussions we had around the attainment gap. I first asked for it in December. Had there been one? I was told yes, and that we would get it. A few months later, when I asked where is it, I was told it wasn't the right time because of budgets. I then asked a few months later and was told, oh, I've got no recollection of having said there was one. We're now 18 months on. This may be my last chance to ask yet again, if an impact assessment was done, can we have it, please? And if it wasn't, could we have an apology to this panel for the suggestion that it had been done? Thank you.
I don't know about that one. I mean, I think the library needs assessment is wrapped up in that. Do you recall, is that?
I don't know what it is.
Right.
Every time I bring this up, everybody looks blank and says, oh, I don't know. It's recorded. It's on the webcast. It's recorded. For each time I've asked. It has been asked several times. So I don't know why everybody every time looks blank.
Yeah, Laura.
I'll take it away and get a response tomorrow.
I was just thinking
It's
that
fine.
maybe that is something we need to take away. And
I'll take that away
yeah,
and get back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Any other recommendations, suggestions? Well, the final thing that we do need to consider is the June meeting, which is unlikely to take place, as we know, but we don't currently have any, now that the neighbourhood model has been shifted to July. Yes, Councillor Crawshaw.
My understanding is that at annual council, we will be shifting to a different structure. So I don't believe that there will be a June or July of this committee, because I think it will be under a new scrutiny structure. That's my understanding. So I think in that sense, you can't set anything for a committee that we don't know which committee it's going to be, who's going to be the chair, any of those sorts of things.
I'm happy to take that. Should we make a note of that? Yeah. Okay. I think we've finally come to the end of that. Any other? We're all happy with that. Sorry, agenda item 7, urgent business, which I'm assuming there isn't any. So, I will echo Councillor Nichols and thank you all for your contributions over the last 2 years. And I hope I will see you in the new structure in some shape or form. Thanks very much. Thank you all.